Hey, Fidelity. How can I remember to invest every month?
With the Fidelity app, you can choose a schedule and set up recurring investments in stocks and ETFs.
Oh, that sounds easier than I thought.
You got this.
Yeah, I do. Now, where did I put my keys?
You will find them where you left them.
Investing involves risk, including risk of loss. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC, member NYSE, SIPC.
Hello, I am Joel McLeod, and welcome to the 905er. We are coming into the final stretch of the Ontario election campaign. As of recording this, it appears that this election will be Doug Ford's to lose. The opposition parties have managed to move the polls a bit. Bonnie Crombie's Ontario Liberals are inching up and up in the polls, while Merritt Stiles' NDP is not necessarily moving any needles. Does this mean that we're looking for a change in government? Not quite. Predictions are still showing that the Ontario PCs are looking at a majority government, although that certainty is changing day by day. Is there a chance to change the government at Queen's Park? Well, some think it's possible through strategic voting, picking the party's candidate with the most likely chance to defeat the incumbent, which in this case is probably the Ontario PC candidate. Does this work? Well, there is one person who does, JB Burrows, or as he's often referred to on TikTok and other social media platforms, Canadian Poly 101. JB and his group of volunteers have created a website called smartvoting.ca, the purpose of which is to identify the most viable candidate to win over the Ontario PC choice in this election. This isn't necessarily a new idea, but it often pops up whenever a right-wing party is in power in Canada. The hope is that afterwards, a coalition of progressive parties can come together to govern for a time. I wanted to get into this a bit. We've talked about strategic voting or mixed member representation and other forms of electoral reform before on this podcast. I've yet to see any real momentum for change, though, in Ontario. And there is time, though, to turn this around. But these conversations tend to highlight the inherent inequalities in our electoral system of first past the post. The question I have is strategic voting the way for Ontarians to get the government that they want? Well, in this episode, JB and I get into it. One note, though, before we begin this episode. I am going to make a plea for you to support the work that we're doing here. Please go to our website, 905er.ca, and click on the Supporter tab. For only $5 a month or for $50 a year, you'll be helping us keep the lights on and to help produce episodes like this. As well, you will get access to our bonus content, 905er Extra Minutes, exclusively for our paid supporters. Please go to 905er.ca to sign up today. Okay, thank you, JB Burrows, for taking the time from TikTok, social media, all things 21st century related to come onto the 905er podcast to talk about smartvoting.ca, which is a pet project that you've set up for this Ontario election. JB, thanks for taking the time to come on.
Thanks for having me. This is awesome.
Rather than me doing a horrible job of trying to describe what smartvoting.ca is, why don't I just ask you directly, what is it for our listeners? Where can they find it? And what is it that you're hoping to do with this project?
Yeah. No, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. Smart voting was a project that I wanted to do for a long time. I funny enough, I bought the domain on Christmas Day in like 2018. And I was just like, this is a thing that I want to do, but I just didn't have the time. But the upcoming federal election and the Ontario election that we're currently amidst in was sort of the catalyst for me that I'm like, okay, I need to sit down and I need to do this. What it is it is a website that anybody can go to see updated modeling and predictions for their riding based off of, very, very complicated pieces of algorithms that take in polling data, that take in demographical data, that take in all of these different factors that determines what a voter is going to vote for, and kind of figures out what it's going to happen in that. It's a model that myself and my friends who build these kind of things have been working with for about a year, and we've gotten very accurate with it. We got the BC election about 98% accurate just internally with our own testing with it. Saskatchewan election, we got a little bit less accurate, but I mean, 98% in BC was pretty good. So we felt comfortable rolling this out. So you can go to smartvoting.ca, you find your riding in the drop down or in the list, and you can see who the current MPP is for that riding. You can see where it's trending to go, and you can see who would be the best strategic vote for that particular riding. This is a website that is intended to stop the Conservatives from winning. It is a website to stop some vote splitting that we see in Ontario. But more importantly, it is a website to do a protest vote. A lot of people talk about these different types of protest votes you can do, not voting, throwing away your ballot, whatever. But I don't believe in not voting. I think that's a really lazy protest vote. I think the best protest vote you can do is actually using your vote to try to get politicians to give us actual change. So if a majority of Ontarians say, no, I'm going to vote against my own ideology and best interests and vote for a liberal or a new Democrat because they're the best person to stop the more damaging conservatives, that is going to send a message to all parties that, okay, well, people have made a decision that we need to change this. So that's kind of the gist of it.
There's a lot to unpack there, and I guess we just kind of go through it layer by layer. I guess the big objection to this, I'm going to kind of try and take a devil's advocate approach to this, maybe, is that I always find the idea of strategic voting, like I don't find it ever works. And the idea kind of maybe voting against your own interests or your own wants and desires of what you want to see represented at Queen's Park or wherever, ultimately is kind of self-defeating, isn't it? Like the idea of the election is I put my vote in, this is who I want. This is who I want to represent me.
Right.
And there's something I've always had a problem with the idea of a strategic vote of I'm going to vote. I don't really like this other person. They're kind of like my B choice, but I'm going to vote for them because, oh geez, option C is the far worse, and what and what have you. And I just maybe just like argue against me on that.
Yeah, no,
that
for sure.
Premise.
No, it's a very valid thing. It's often the debate when we have these types of conversations, and what I would say is that it's really unfortunate that you are in a position as a voter that you need to make a singular decision on one person to be able to for your vote, right? Obviously, only one person can win. I get that, but Canadians and broadly human beings are interesting creatures. There are things that I'm going to agree with one candidate and more agree with a different. It is very common in a multi-representational democracy like we live in to have one or two or three parties that, yeah, I don't really like what their stance is on this, but I can stomach them really good on this. So like I'd feel comfortable if they win. And I think what the point of strategic voting is to send a message that, we need to stop thinking this as a binary, this person, this person, this person. I think elections are meant to be sort of ranked where you have your, this is my number one pick that I want to do. But if they can't win for whatever reason, then I'm okay with this person. Then I'm okay with this person. This is such an important position in our country and in democracy to pick our representatives that I think it is okay to rank them. I think it is okay to put them in an order. And that's ultimately the reform that we are looking for in our organization is a ranked ballot or a single transferable vote ballot where you go in to vote and instead of just putting an X beside one name, you say who you want the most and who you want the least. And when the night is over and the votes are counted, I think with that outcome, Canadians can feel a little bit more comfortable because they see, oh, my second choice won. Okay, cool. I'm okay with that, right? Where, yeah, you're probably upset your first choice didn't get in, but at least your vote did go to the person that ended up winning. And It's
you're
just to separate this like stigma of
right.
two people versus each other, three or four, whatever the region. So
You're preaching to the converted here. I mean, we've done many episodes on electoral reform on this podcast. um, I don't think it'll happen anytime soon, mostly because, well, politics. But I get where I get the motivation of what you're trying to do, because a lot of people say they're unhappy with, and that's the thing is when we get into the polls of it, the polls are telling us that people are unhappy with the current Ford government. There's a lot of dissatisfaction with Doug Ford, according to polls. However, neither the NDP nor the Liberals nor the Greens have really seemed to capitalize on that dissatisfaction
yeah.
properly to kind of motivate people to say, we're the alternative. We are the government in waiting, and now you can give us the reins of power, and we're gonna give us a shot at the next 4 years. And what do you take on that? You know, that we've had this will be 6 years of Doug Ford in the Ontario PCs in Queen's Park, and yet in that time, the NDP and the Liberals have not really been able to move the needle. That people are looking at them and saying, "I want to hear more from you guys. I want to see what you guys are going to do in power."
Yeah, I think ultimately, and this is an issue at the federal level as well. I think those two particular parties, and throw the Greens into the boot here because they're sort of in this mess, are left leaning or left sympathetic ideologies or parties. And when you're going to the left and you all just look at each other and you're fighting each other, where liberals are fighting New Democrats are fighting liberals, and there's this uh, uh, attack at each other. And then you look at the guy that's currently there, the conservative, and he's just hanging out, the only one there to that nobody is always going to get that 30% of the vote in the province. I think our left parties are too busy infighting with each other in order
Hmm.
to actually be able to convince voters properly that this is the pick me or whatever. But I also think that there is a little bit of a misstep when, say, one of those other parties isn't viable inside of that riding, that they try to take from the conservatives. And what it's causing this vast range of what's accepted in a party where you have liberals and New Democrats that are more conservative leaning because they happen to be in a more blue riding. So they're trying to pull those voters. But then in something like right now, like Toronto Center or Toronto St. Paul, where the conservatives, well, not St. Paul, sorry, there's another Toronto one, Spadina Fort York. The conservatives are like a distant third or fourth place in these ridings. So you're just seeing these two progressive parties fight it out. And I'm in the stance, it's like the liberals and the Democrats, as fundamentally different as they are, I think there does need to be a very serious sit down at the table, being like, we're never going to win if we keep fighting, right? There needs to be not a merger, but just sort of a non-confrontational agreement that where you're strong in Toronto, we're not going to run a candidate, and where you're strong in the suburbs, we're not going to run a candidate. And then at the end of the day, at the end of the election, sit down who got the most seats, because and collate, if anything, to form a government. We need to get back to this idea because it's never been done in Ontario or in Canada at the federal level, that it's okay to form a coalition. It's okay to sit down at the table and have these conversations. This idea, this Americanization of our elections, where it's just fight, fight, fight against the other side, isn't. It's working on the right, definitely, but it's not. It's not sticking on the left. And I think people are just, they don't like, they're just going to pick the person they always go with, and then that's how we get this vote split. And 58 ridings currently in Ontario are suffering from a vote split. 58. That if they
And
could pick one, Ford wouldn't win. So that's what's frustrating to me. Yeah.
I hear your frustration. I think a lot of people are frustrated that, the number that got thrown out in the last, I believe, last general election in Ontario was only 17% of all eligible voters actually voted for the Ontario PCs. And,
When you factor in non-voting, yeah.
That tells me an awful lot, that there's this huge swath of the population that doesn't feel engaged in our politics, either through apathy, disinterest, or I think there's a part of it is a feeling of malaise, like my vote does not count. No, they're all the same. Nobody speaks to the issues that are affecting me, my family,
Yeah.
my community. And I always look at that's a huge part of the population that yes, you're not going to get them all, but if the NDP or the Liberals were looking to grow their vote base, that's a huge pool of voters to go talk to and say, hey, give me a shot. Maybe I can turn things around. And I haven't seen that from any of the opposition parties in the last 6 years. No, it's been a.
Yeah,
I'm gonna.
the liberals haven't been able to get off their own feet. They haven't been able to get footholding. I think they're starting to with Bonnie Crombie. I think they're starting to have that ground game again, but it's just not there.
Yeah.
And I'm saying this with no disrespect to either parties. I have a lot of acquaintances in each party that are currently running, and
Mhm.
they're not happy with my website. By the way, they're very upset that this had to exist. But I keep telling them it's like, well, give us a system where this doesn't have to exist, right? Like
Right.
this is existing, and there's almost 1 million people that have visited the site just from Ontario for a reason. That should be data enough
Well,
to change.
and I think you're. I guess we're getting to the underlying message here with with your website is that on the surface it seems like okay, be strategic, but I think you're right that there isn't people do realize I'm not getting the result that I want. People,
Mhm.
even if I elected the Liberal or the NDP candidate to Queen's Park, are they at the same time having to come back to the riding and saying, are we getting it done? Is it what we're doing? Is it really impacting people on the ground, helping their lives, growing the economy, all these things? And it does come down to the system. The system is like if it's first past the post, we're getting to just it's all confrontation, right? It's all theater, no show, because ultimately, like everything is done for clickbait, and 30-second sound bites that you can throw in the
Right.
evening news, as opposed to like here's a substantial policy or program that's actually going to have meaningful impact to help grow the economy, create jobs, ensure healthcare, good education, all this stuff that we're expecting the government to do.
Mhm.
What does it say that like the NDP and the Liberals just don't seem to want to engage in that substantive discussion? I find it very frustrating. For 6 years, kind of watch them all talk about Doug Ford. Like we know he's got scandals. We know people know he's crooked. Yet why is it that you're going to do something different than what Doug Ford is going to do? Other than okay, I'll get a
Yeah.
tax cut if you get elected. Whoop de do.
I think the challenge with this election too is we're going through things at the federal level. We're going through things geopolitically. And I think I think this election is not one that people want. I think a lot
Hmm.
of Canadians, at least the ones that are at least politically connected enough to read the news and see what's kind of going on, are really, really focused on what this federal election is going to look like, whenever that's going to be, whether we have it in the
Right.
spring or the fall. Given what's going on in the states with these tariff threats and all these different things. And I think Doug Ford is just capitalizing on a chance to kind of secure a little bit more and a longer mandate. But it still is one of these important types. I had the same conversations in 2022 because I was pushing a strategic vote then. And we did the math at the end. Like me and my political science buddy sat down and we crunched the numbers, and I'm like, what are we even doing? Like he wouldn't have got a majority if we could just figure out in each riding what one to go with. And I don't know if it means that we have to go through a true reform like mixed member proportional. I honestly just think it's a ballot change. It doesn't need to be this big complicated
Right.
like political theory. It just needs to be we're going to have the same system where we elect one person for one riding that represents us in this, but instead of putting an X beside a name, you rank them and we have multiple rounds. And I'll point to our good friends, my second home in Ireland. They just had a general election and they do a single transferable ranked ballot. And it was not controversial. It was done pretty quickly. There wasn't this theater. It was boring, right?
Yeah.
And and they pick the new person, and that's that, and because they rank it right,
Well,
and people felt happy.
here's
So
on that note, and this is something that um, I think people will be surprised to listen to is we have a single transferable vote ranked ballots all the time. If a municipality so choose, they could like to do that. London did, and elected a council. You know what? The council got along pretty well because everybody knew kind of where they stood with their constituency, right?
yeah,
They knew like, okay, I've got a strong base. We're all here. I was on the second vote, or second ballot, third ballot, whatever, and it resulted in a more harmonious council.
yeah, people trusted it, right, because
People
they
trust it
saw
because
the
like
names.
I got that person got in, they got my support. The other thing that irks me and why so many politicians at all levels who are against it, I find are hypocrites, is that every single one of them, every conservative, liberal, and NDP got elected to their candidacy through a single transferable vote.
Right.
They
And
every
if they're a
per,
leader, they definitely did, because all the leadership races
exactly
were like that.
every political party operates on this basis. They know, and to say, well, we won't know how to campaign. Like, yes, you do.
Hmm.
Every person would know. You'd have a team that says, well, I know how to campaign in that. We just have to broaden our net from just conservative, liberal, or NDP voters to the entire constituency.
Hmm.
And I agree. Like I personally, I'm again, that's me editorializing here. I don't like the mixed member proportional because I don't like the idea of.
And you would have to amend the Constitution to do that. Like it wouldn't be this easy thing for us
Well,
to
I just don't
implement.
like the idea of like a party leader having a list of somebody that, oh yeah, we've got 5 extra seats to fill. Okay, I can put in 5 of my best buddies or five
Yeah,
of my
no,
cronies
I
in
don't like
there
it either.
who are not accountable to, like, I like the idea of walking into a constituency office and say, I didn't vote for you, but you work for me.
Hmm.
And I have an
Hmm.
issue, and this is my issue, and let's get it to it. So
Yeah. Yeah, or
that's
it's honestly it changes the dynamic of the campaign because you're having conversations about, hey, vote for me versus, hey, can you put me number one, number two on your
right,
ballot, right? I think, and when you change that type of conversation, it changes what politicians are going to be willing and wanting
right.
to do for their constituents because they just want to be ranked higher, not just picked at all, right? And what we're describing is a paradox inside of political science and elections where why would the person who got elected on this system change the system that got them elected, right?
Right.
You can sit here in a campaign and be the third place party and blow all this smoke saying, we're going to change this, we're going to change this, we're going to change this. But
Hmm.
then when you actually get that chance to change it, you sit down, we're like, well, if we do this, we're going to lose next time. So it's like,
Yeah.
you see what I mean? It's
Oh
hard
no,
for it to change it. And
I totally get it.
it's got
And
to take political will that, yeah. Sorry, please.
you know, you're absolutely right. I mean, it is one of those things like why change the car that got you to the party, right? Um, Bringing it back a
Hmm.
bit to this provincial election.
Yes.
I could talk about voting styles all day, all live long day. So we bring it back to the topic of the day.
So could
It,
I, my friend. So could I.
the like the current, we're looking at the current polls, and you know, the fact that Ford has incredible unlikability in the province. He people don't necessarily trust him. They think he's corrupt. They think he's opportunistic for calling this election in the midst of Trump's tariffs. I mean, yesterday, for people listening, Trump just announced 25% tariffs on aluminum and steel in Canada. So you know that fight will never ever go away for the next 4 years, I believe. Um, People don't believe it's about Ontario's ability to fight Trump, despite what Ford says. I'm questioning of though, you know, the OLP, and there's just a poll that came out recently talking about voter motivation level. And despite all this stuff around Ford's unlikability, we're seeing that the PCs are still very much behind him. Obviously, they want him elected. And there's talk about motivation level, and they have like extremely motivated to get your person elected. 51%, 51% for Ford, only 22 for Crombie, and 15 for Merritt Stiles amongst their supporters. Like this isn't
What
a
poll was this? Was this the
this is
sorry, I
Ky-
just
Kyla
because we got another poll.
this was done
Sorry.
February 10th. Kyla Ronell and Fitch from the uh, who's been doing this polling. I found this from a reliable friend I follow on Twitter, and I'll put the link to the
Okay.
in the show notes. And hang on, I'm just going to share this. And yeah, so
Yeah, no, I'm just curious because like this is my thing, right?
yeah,
This is the thing that I look
this
at.
I
So
mean, I was just kind of doing a little bit of research before I came on here, and I found this poll that that they're talking about the motivation to get out there, and we're seeing like the Tories are still
Mhm.
very motivated to support Ford, and I get that. But we're not seeing that motivation amongst the OLP and the NDP. And I'm curious just to get your sense of that. Like I've always thought that
Oh, this is relay. Okay. Yeah.
yeah I'm just I find it a fascinating just take that even amongst the supporters, like we're not seeing that motivation to get out and get the change
So
in
so
there.
let me tell you something. So in the time I've started smartvoting.ca and people we have an email set up that people can reach out to
Mhm.
ask questions and I call it the data email so people can report data inaccuracies. But what's actually happening is people are coming in and thinking that we got something wrong. And one of the most, and when we don't, the one of the most common things we get is because on our site, when you go to your writing, it says your MPP's name. It says your current MPP is this.
Mhm.
People think that this is the federal election. The amount of emails that I have gotten, and
Mhm.
I'm not trying to be dramatic, I'm not trying to be dismissive of people coming to the site. It is daily, 5 to 10 times a day, people emailing, being like, "Hi, I live in writing X. My MPP is not this," and then they say they're federal MPP,
Right.
or my riding is conservative, but you have it as New Democrat. It's like, no, that's federal. Like there
Mhm.
are people who are going to our site, and it's very clearly about the provincial election with the provincial parties and all this stuff. Don't know, and that's the one of the other reasons why we wanted to create smart voting is to give people a tool that they can go to see what's going on in their riding. Is there an election? Oh, there's a provincial election. Okay, so what's the details of that election? Um, and using these polls as a precursor or sort of a barometer check about what's going on. I saw this relay poll that you sent me, and it's on the list. Relay, unfortunately, is very unreliable. They've had some polling mishaps in the past. So one of the polls that I would point to actually recently is a Palace poll. Palace poll came out, or sorry, a liaison poll.
Mhm.
They came out with a poll yesterday that has the Liberals within 10 points of Ford. So like the polling right now is like there's two very extremes where they have Ford walking away with a landslide, but then you got Ecos and Palace and Liaison, these other pollsters that are looking at this election being like, it's closer than we think.
Well, that's the thing. Like,
So
I'm looking on CP24 here. It came out yesterday. Nanos is reporting that the was it the 16-point advantage Ford had over the Liberals is now reduced to 13, and that we're starting to see a trend line. And I'm curious because you just mentioned, and I think there's something to be said here, is that we have the federal liberal leadership race happening right now, and we're seeing that polling for the federal team between the Poilievre and now the leaderless liberals is just almost starting to crisscross the trend
uh,
lines.
Joel, my friend, I've never seen a spike like this in my life. Like I've studied polls, I
We could
follow
get
trend lines.
we could get
Like
into
that's
that.
a whole other conversation, but
That's a whole other conversation. But I'm wondering, like, is that bleeding over into the provincial election? Because we hear liberal, oh yeah, I like that Carney fella, or I like what Freeland has to say, or what Gould has to say, or they just got rid of Trudeau, so they're gonna fix the ship, so to speak. And we're
Mhm.
seeing that overlap. That like I'm just wondering, like, somebody who kind of does this for a living, and you're looking at it, is it a matter of Crombie's actually catching the attention of the Ontario electorate and that people are coming around to her? Because my criticism of Bonnie Crombie since day one has been she's been invisible. Any chance she's had to take the fight to Doug Ford to say, I am the premier in waiting. I am going to keep you on your heels, Doug. She has failed to live up to the opportunity. I mean, how many by-elections did she not run in, and how
Yeah.
long it took her to make her decision now? And the same with the NDP. I thought,
She might not even win her riding. That's the thing.
and that's the thing. I'm like, how is it that she could possibly lose her riding, and yet we're seeing this? Oh, the liberals, that the liberals and the PCs are starting to. I said, that's not what I'm getting on the ground. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
talking anecdotally. I'm
Sure.
not feeling it.
I think there is something here that a lot of analysts are not really looking at, and it's fine because it'd be easy to miss this. And Ecos actually tapped into this on their new federal poll that's probably coming out today or tomorrow. Ecos started to trickle out some polling data from their latest federal poll, which, by the way, probably going to be a liberal landslide federally, right? Like Ecos has tapped something that I don't think the other pollsters are starting to figure out. So Ecos said in this poll that 74% of Canadians, now we have to assume this is Canada wide, so Ontario is going to be a chunk of this. 74% of Canadians would most likely vote for a Liberal Party, speaking federally,
Yeah.
than voting for the Conservatives and switching government right now because of what's going on with the United States and Donald Trump. That, okay, it's getting a little testy. There's all this kind of talk about things. I don't want to switch my government right now. I don't want to go through a change.
Right.
And we're seeing that start to be shown at the federal level because a lot of these polls we're getting at the federal level that show, the liberals climbing very aggressively isn't even with Mark Carney or anybody on the questions. This is
Right.
all Donald Trump and like how is Canada handling the Donald Trump situation. And I think that is spilling over provincially in the sense that people are like, let's just stick with what we got right now. We got to take care of this. And Ford, being an opportunistic person, has taken on to that and knows
Right.
that, and that's ultimately why this election's in our hands right now.
So, I mean, it's not basically what we're seeing here. I mean, I'm just diving too much into polls and whatnot. Is that Canadians are just saying, I'm not thinking 4 years down the road. I'm not thinking, another term. I'm thinking right now, I just don't want change. I need some, we managed to get through Trump the first time with these guys. Let's do it again because I just, forget 4 years down the road. I'll manage. I'll worry about 4 years when 4 years happens. Right now, we need to figure out how we're going to get, trucks across the border to sell our goods. Same as vice versa. Like that's where we're at now with American Canadian relations.
I'm going to be really interesting to see what happens with polling in this Ontario election in Hamilton now that we have the steel tariffs. Like, I'm going to be really interested to see like Hamilton NDP bastion, like stronghold of, and
Right.
the NDP is having some issues in Hamilton Center because they dropped that one candidate, and now there's this dispute, and they might not regain that seat. There is a lot of issues in Hamilton for the existing New Democrats, right?
Right.
So Hamilton's going to be Hamilton might be the story of this election. Is that trending NDP at the start of the election, right? Trump tariffs come on, steel tariffs come on after the Trump tariffs don't. And now they got 2 weeks to kind of figure out what they want to do to navigate this, right? And who they want to put to Queen's Park. And don't be surprised if there's a little bit of a conservative squeeze happen in Hamilton, right? Because I think people are going to want to go with the status quo because changing governments is expensive. Changing governments takes time, right? You got to
Yep.
appoint all these new positions. And we're not, like you said, we're not dealing 4 years down the road right now. We're dealing like next month. Like, what are
Right.
we doing next month?
Right.
Right. So that's,
Well, I mean,
that's in my mind. That's in my mind.
And
So,
in Hamilton, I suspect it. I don't think we're going to see change in Hamilton.
I
Hamilton,
don't think it's going to change either. I just think it's going to be squeezed.
it might be. You might see you might see the vote numbers change a bit, but I think ultimately, I suspect Hamilton Center will go NDP, just because
Sarah's running a great campaign down there, though. That's the thing.
she
So
is, but I also think that there are enough people who just kind of
toe the party line.
toe
They
the
vote
party
on the
line.
party
So I
Yeah.
mean, I'm not Sarah might have enough support within certain circles that she's able to cobble together her victory. who knows? That I'll be definitely as a race to watch. Um, I guess when we look at all this, we could talk about polling all the livelong day. I think at the end of the day, though, it comes down to parties and candidates talking with people, not to people. And I find that the NDP and the Liberals provincially have really lacked in this department over the last 4 years, 6 years. I found that Merritt Stiles, when she won the leadership of the NDP, a leadership campaign is a good chance to go out and talk to people and say, this is my vision for the province. This is my these are the problems that I'm identifying as my priorities, and this is my plan to address them. Same as
Yeah.
with the Ontario Liberals. I thought this last leadership campaign, I was really optimistic to hear of real discussions about where does the province need to go. And I found it to be very insular. There wasn't a lot of talking to Ontarians. It was about talking to fellow Liberals, which I think ultimately defeated them because people are smart. I know we like to say, oh, the public is stupid. They don't know anything.
Mhm.
I'm the opposite. I think the public are very smart and they don't
I agree.
and
Definitely agree with that.
I find that the Ontario NDP and the Ontario Liberals have really, and I think it's the same problem that the Democrats in the states had in the last election, is that they, at the end of the day, they can identify every fault in Doug Ford and every hypocrisy that he has stood for. But at the end of the day, people say, okay, but what are you going to do for me? What are you going to do for my family? I think have really failed to do that, to go out and connect to those grassroots. I mean, I'm as a kind of a sidebar example, the Liberals have lost a number of union endorsements. The firefighters, that was a good stronghold endorsement for the Liberals since I remember when McGuinty came into power.
Hmm. Hmm.
They've switched to Ford, and I said, "What is going on here?" Relationships around the province, did they just let go or rot away because I'm just going to take it for granted?
Yeah. No, there was some major missteps. I think one of the missteps for Bonnie Crombie, and then the broader Liberal party in Ontario is they're into to a seat sooner. Like,
Mhm.
ask one of their Liberal members to step down temporarily, run Bonnie Crombie, get her into a seat, right? Have that by-election, and get her on Queens Park's floor, talking and getting her into meetings and getting her into committees and getting her into these things, so she can show the people, like, look at all the things that I fought for. And then when the general happens, then you move it, that other candidate reruns, and then they're
Mhm.
back into their seat. So that didn't happen. They waited and waited and waited, and she still to this minute doesn't have a seat and is running in Mississauga Cooksville and might lose it, right? I think the Liberals a very bad ground game right now. They just can't. They, I think the New Democrats are facing an issue where they're having an issue scaling up. I think their ground game is good, but their ground game is good in Davenport, where they're going to win by 50 points, or Toronto Danforth, which they're going to win
Right.
probably by 30 points, right? Around in Mississauga, in Brampton, in the Stony Creeks and the Burlingtons. Like, they need to
Yeah.
be on the ground in these key 905 ridings that they can win. Durham and Oshawa probably going to be gone for the New Democrats and handed over to the Conservatives because they just don't have the ground game there. You don't see signs when you go there. They're not out and about like the Conservatives are. They're
And
just not.
well, it makes me
So
wonder, like, again, um, I'm trying to remember how long they've been. I'm going to say 6 years. They've had 6 years since Doug Ford first got elected
mhm.
to figure out, okay, where did we go wrong? The last election, there should have been huge gains,
It should have been their election to win, to be honest.
and it didn't. And I wonder. I was hoping to see, okay, maybe the last election, okay, we learned our lesson. We need to fix it. And I find that both the NDP and the Liberals have not learned a lesson in terms of, you're right. Like, I think a ground game, they used to be the big red machine. right? And the
Sure.
NDP still talks about the orange crush wave. It's like this stuff doesn't exist anymore. You guys have let it atrophy over the last 6 years. And I mean, I think your initiative with smart voting does have a chance to kind of change the dynamic of Ontario here. I thought not to kind of throw you under the bus here, but the fact that you're able to do this and it's having such an impact on the election, what does that say about these provincial parties, these political parties, that this is able to happen?
It's not great, Joel. Like I have it in our about us in our mission that like we don't want this to exist. Like I'm in the process, we're growing this out. We have volunteers that are willing to get on the ground and knock doors and get flyers out, and this is all like coming with this site. And not to get into the financials, but people are donating. People are wanting this thing
Hmm.
to we want a better system for the voters. We want a better system for us. And if the politicians aren't going to get it, we're going to mobilize and show politicians that we want this. And that's the goal here. Is obviously the long-term goal for smart voting is to turn it into more of a voter information hub so people can kind of see what this looks like and what their riding looks like. But in the interim, in the immediate time, it's to show politicians, it's to show the parties that we are the people that are voting. You're not voting. You don't get to decide who wins. We decide who wins.
Hmm.
And if we've asked you for decades to change this system, let's get rid of this first past the post. And to the credit, Ontario tried with a referendum back in the 2000s, but that failed. And we couldn't get it done again. We haven't even started the conversation about changing it at the provincial level and at the federal level as well. Trudeau tried, but failed terribly in 2015
Right.
for his voter reform. And it goes back to that old paradox: why would you change the system that got you elected? So it's time for the voters to make a stand, and I don't want this to happen. I don't think any of us want it to go. We had a volunteer meeting yesterday, and we're all sitting here like, this is crazy that we need to do this. This is crazy that we need to have this system in place to do this. And others have done it before, but it's time. And we did it in 2015 with the strategic vote at the federal level, and that's how we got Trudeau. And say what you want about that tenure. It 2015 to 2019 was looking pretty good. Like it was like
Hmm.
we were all like, okay, it's not Harper, it's not the Conservatives. We can rebuild a little bit here. And then the pandemic happened, and the rest is sort of history. But
Yeah. I mean,
it's amazing what power the voter has. Is what I'm trying to say. Is like
well, but it's a good point because I get frustrated when I hear people say, "Oh, my vote doesn't matter," and I always say, "The hell it doesn't!" Like that, your pencil on a piece of paper is the biggest. It's the most powerful tool you can have.
yeah,
I think by bringing a ranked ballot or a single transferable vote ballot, it becomes even more powerful because you send I need to I need to spend some time in my riding and talk to people, figure out where it went. Or you say the first time you win, I won on the third or fourth ballot. Okay, I'm hanging on by a thread here. I need to really work here. Or same vice versa. I won on the first ballot. Clearly, I'm doing something right here.
yeah.
Let's keep going.
Yeah. Your
It
mandate is so much more secured. Like it's just we'd see less minority governments that actually work together,
Well,
right?
on that note, it I think the biggest thing that turns people off of politics is the tone. Like federally, looking at Pierre Poilievre, who is combative at everything. Everything is the worst. It's
His
just
whole personality.
and it's tiring. And I understand people get angry with every government has a due date, and
Hmm. Hmm.
sometimes the people need to kick you out the door. I
Sure.
get that, but my God, like
But is that who we want to give the
well,
keys?
the
Is the question.
negativity there, right? It's
Yeah.
just everything can't be this bad. My hope would be like on a ranked ballot system. That wouldn't happen because it's really hard to say, okay, maybe you're going to give the liberal candidate in your riding the first ballot. You know, you like what they've done. They've helped you out on a file or two, or they brought money in to help out your community, whatever. But you guys do need to go. You're getting a little long in the tooth.
Sure. Yeah.
Who gets that second choice? Maybe you say, well, I don't Like, the idea of like I have to deal with that guy for 4 years. Ugh.
Yeah.
But if you have somebody who's a little bit more moderate, a little bit more reasonable in their dialogue, yeah, okay, I'll give you my second choice. Or maybe they give you your first choice and they give the Liberal candidate a second choice. It allows for that. I think the dialogue itself, because you have to be a palatable second choice to people. And you can't do that if everything is, it's broken, axe attacks,
Yeah.
don't be woke, that gets on people and people say, yeah. I think
Yeah.
that, federally, I think that's what's killing them right now is that without Trudeau there to be his counterweight, people now have to look at him and say, I don't want this guy for 4 years. I don't want to see this guy every time I
Yeah.
turn on the news for 4 years.
I think what it also does on the flip side is in these ridings where there is a very strong independent or a strong distant third party, it gives them a chance to show the voice that they have in a community. I think to
Mhm.
Parkdale High Park, in Toronto, one of the more low to middle class incomes in Toronto. Very, very large socialist population there. Massive amounts of people who are socialist and identify as socialists that are proud to be socialist. They actually have a candidate for the Socialist Party of Canada running in that riding. Like it is, and they did okay. Like they got a decent chunk of votes. But just imagine what would happen if we could see who was the first choice. And the new Democratic candidate that would win that riding inevitably would be able to look and go, oh, wow, that Socialist Party got 3,000 votes as first try, right? We still got their second or third or whatever and
Mhm.
still win. But it does change that thought process at the table, right? Say, I'm not trying to get into a political ideology argument, but like this is, you know, there are some really, really neat independents out there that authentically want to do really good things for their community. They just can't get that foothold because they're not attached to a party or they're not attached to a viable enough party to even get that sort of brand recognition,
But
right? So
it also can lead to those ideas getting absorbed by other parties because it's parties say, well, this is
look at
fun.
cannabis,
Well,
like
that's just it,
the
right?
marijuana party, right?
You,
Like,
you look at that and you say, this is gaining traction. If I want to bolster my chances in the next election, maybe if I start softening my stance on policy X, I might be able to win over some of this support. Um, like I just think like it's a small thing, but it's a huge thing that can really
it's
change
massive.
the
It's
dynamic of
massive.
our politics. We had on point finger. It's like this is what I stand for. Can I have your first ballot choice? No. Can I have your second?
Lost, right? Because you lost, you didn't
Yeah.
win, you're not the candidate. But then you look at the numbers, it's like, I got X number of first ballot choices or second ballot choices.
Yeah.
And yes, I didn't get through the finish line and somebody got there before I did.
Mhm.
But it gives that if this is your first time running or your first candidacy, it gives you our whole mission is just let's get to that. Because I love this country. I love the fact that at the federal level, and you don't like B, you got C, D, and E that you can look at as well, right? I want that system to exist, and
But
we need to
I
change.
I agree, and I like it. I think it's also good for the parties to have that feedback immediately of, where what do people think of us
Hmm.
in this
Hmm.
riding? Um, yeah, I mean, okay. Again, we could be doing this for hours, so I'm going to have to call it an end to it because I think our listeners want to get on with their day. So, uh,
Appreciate that.
JB, thank you very much for coming on to talk about this. Again, if people still have to make their decision by election day in Ontario, where can they go?
So smartvoting.ca is your one-stop shop. You can find your riding. You can now even sign up for alerts. So if there's a big change in your riding, we'll send you an email, just be like, "Hey, your riding switched, and this is the thing." The goal here is we're going to break up with Doug Ford. That it's a Valentine's Day election. It's time for us to move on to a new crush, right? I'm not saying orange. I'm not saying red. I'm not saying whoever, but it's time to break up with our toxic person and have a different government here. And the only way that we are going to do that is if each riding at each level we break it down and see who is the best person to win. We can have 4 years of whoever. We'll regroup after and see who's best to actually lead this country, or sorry, lead this province. We are working on our federal model. Our federal model will be out after the provincial election. So if you live in another province for some reason, or you just want to keep following what we're doing, We're going to do federal government. We're going to do each provincial election as it comes up. We even have aspirations to do municipal elections if we have enough data for it, right? Like, this thing is going to be, you put your postal code in, you see everything you need to see on one fancy dashboard about all the information in your riding, because we need to be smarter when we vote. There's no reason why we need to go in with apathy or confusion or I'm going to say it straight on, stupidity, right? We can do this smart. We can do this calculated. And this is our voice. This is what we fought for, or our country fought for, to give us this freedom. And we're just taking it for granted. So it's time to be smarter, and let's vote. And if you don't want a strategic vote, that's totally fine. But if you go to vote, bring your mom, your dad, your cousins, whoever you can drag to that polling place, just get them to vote. And then we'll have a very different government, I think, in the end of the day. So
good advice. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. That's it for this episode of the 905er. Thank you for listening. As always, you can send us your feedback, thoughts, and concerns, or ideas for future episodes to our email, info@905er.ca. We'd love to hear from you. You can help us keep the 905er going by financially supporting us through Patreon as well as PayPal. Visit us at 905er.ca and click on the support tab. As well, links are in the show notes for your convenience. Lastly, you can find us on social media. Search for _905er on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So long for now. See you next time.
Hi, it's Ashley and Jess with Wellness Reality Check. We are two health practitioners, moms, and best friends trying to navigate the world of holistic health in a balanced, productive way that brings health to our lives instead of dogmatic extremes. We'll be breaking down health trends, interviewing your favorite health influencers, and always keeping it real. We hope this podcast brings listeners back down to earth, providing a dose of reality in the often idealized world of health and wellness.
Wellness Reality Check. Follow the show now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or at wellnessrealitycheck.com.
I'm Jeff Woods, and I'm shining a light on music and the rock stars who make it.
He just was one of those people, he stood out.
He was a magic guy. He really was a magic guy. We all have faults. He had the same amount of faults as we all had.
This was before Led Zeppelin. Robert was full on. I mean, he was Led Zeppelin without the band behind him. He had the hair, the jeans, the whole thing, you know, and he was amazing.
The Records and Rockstars podcast, heard around the world and yours to hear wherever you get podcasts. All the episodes from JeffWoodsRadio.com.